It occurs to me that this video should really come with a trigger warning because the lyrics of the song we're about to discuss and delve into cover themes around poor mental health and suicide. Hi, welcome back to Trollholm. Hopefully you've got to this video via my Rough to Release blog series. Otherwise you are probably going to take a very niche dive down the YouTube rabbit hole. Today we are going to be looking at a song I've written for this series. It's called Some Things Break, and I created it as a practical worked example. So we're going to take a full walkthrough of the track creation process from blank page to Bandcamp, if you like, and we'll kind of deep dive into it, have listen to bits along the way, and you can find the full track in the link below. Let's start with the lyrics, because that's where I started with the particular song that we're going to look at. I have a little page in my online notebook, I use OneNote for this, that I have couplets, single lines, sometimes slightly longer verses and things that stick together. And this is just where I put all my brain dumps of interesting stuff that I might want to use. I use OneNote because I can do it on my phone and my laptop and my computer, and it's all there in the same place. Pick your own tool. Paper and pencil is equally good. So what I did was I kind of went through my list of interesting lines and grabbed a few to support the opening verse that I started with here. And you recall back in episodes, I think it was 3 or 4, we talked about spark and spice. So that was the idea and the thing that makes it interesting. For me, the spark was, I was driving back from work, having a bit of a rough time of it in general, and I just couldn't handle being stuck on the dual carriageway and the traffic and the busyness and the danger. I don't drive a lot, and it's pretty scary driving on a dual carriageway if you're not a regular driver. I used to be a good driver, I'm not anymore. So I turned off the dual carriageway, went down all the little back roads, and that was the inspiration for this first little verse. So then I went back through my notebook page and grabbed a load of interesting things that I thought could support it. So I've color coded this just to show the kind of the bits in blue were written together, the bits in red, the lighter red, the green, the purple, they were all written at different times. So this is not something I've sitting down to kind of write the complete song. I've just gone back and I've taken this kind of collage approach and just lifted stuff that previously existed. Then the bits in black are the bits that I kind of pulled together afterwards to stick it together. And when we talk about spark and spice, like I say, the spark was that kind of moment of, verging on a mental breakdown, and the spice was then to take those ideas and rather than have a kind of a whole song of woe is me, because nobody really wants that, I've got 3 little kind of mini stories in there, 3 little vignettes which have their own story arc. Sorry, I've also got my notes just over to the left here, so if I look to the left it's because I'm checking and making sure that I'm not missing anything. If I look to the right it's because I'm doing a side to camera too. Anyway, so we've got the kind of the spark and the spice for the lyrics. Musically, I wanted to add a little bit of spice by starting with a basic kind of, verse, chorus structure, but not having repeated words in the chorus. So although the melody and the chord progression suggests that verse, chorus, there isn't actually a repeated set of words through the song. That was the plan. Then when I started playing it out and arranging it, I realized that wasn't working. At the end of each of the chorus sections, they needed something else to wrap it up. You'll remember we talked about tension and release, and what I was doing was building up the tension, but I wasn't giving it any release. there wasn't a kind of sense of conclusion to each of these little vignettes. So that's when I then went and added in these repeater lines. And you'll remember when we talk about kind of structure, this was one of the examples we gave where things just have, rather than a whole repeating chorus, just a single repeating line. So I added these in afterwards because I thought it needed it to give that tension and release and complete those little stories. And while we're talking about stories and story arcs, although each of the individual kind of sections has its own story arc, there is also an overriding story arc. So we have the kind of the setup, the act 1. We then have kind of act 2 where it goes through to the kind of the lowest point in the story. We've got this frankly horrendous situation of somebody stabbing themselves in the neck in the bank. Then we've got the kind of the growth, the development, the resolution through to as close as we can get to happy ever after in this particular scenario. We've also got, as well as a middle 8 here, we've got verse, chorus, middle 8, and then we've got a little weird quarter on the end as well where it all changes up. You can see that's my basic chord structure there, and I don't know what the name of that chord is, so there's a little question mark over at the end. That happens quite a lot. That's the basics of the lyrics. That's the story we're telling. So let's now move over to the door and we will have a look at the structure of the song. Right, very quick walkthrough of the project from the top down. Buses here, which is just where stuff is sent to. That's just how I choose to group the tracks together. Not really of any interest here. Likewise, any of these tracks around here, the extra vocal tracks here, again, this is just how I do my production. It is not relevant to this particular video, but if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or the comments below. Anyway, so we've got vocals, we've got drums, which in the song were played in rather than sampled, though there are some little sample effects in there as well. We've got bass, so we've got a DI'd electric bass, and we've also got a double bass playing in there. Couple of electric guitars, organ, piano, cello, 3 lots of backing vocals, and then we've got some little pads at the end which are little bits of ear candy, and then some transition stuff, and then some special effects reverbs, the throw, the multi, the slap, and then some stuff around sitting everything together in the same room using this kind of main sort of room space. Then I've got a render of the whole track at the end here because that's the only way we've got to play it back. I had hoped to be able to kind of solo different elements and things as we went through just to highlight stuff, but unfortunately the combination of Reaper, ACO and OBS does not play nicely and everything keeps crashing. So we're not going to be doing that because it was pissing me off. Normally, when I kind of start a song, I'll generally start with guitar or piano or something like that. But I tried that on this one. I wasn't really getting anywhere. Nothing was kind of really sparking. So I thought I'd take a similar approach to the music as I had done with the lyrics. So I just kind of grabbed some old bass lines that I played around with, just some sort of interesting little riffs and nuggets, and stuck them together to make the core of the track. So everything then was built around the bass line. Okay, so we ran the bass line through up until we got to the kind of weird quarter at the end, when I was doing something a bit different. So what I did there was I just grabbed that video file that I had for that, and if I play there, we can see I've just got the rough video pasted in there, and that became the structure for that section. It's a different time signature, different key, and I didn't go around and change and play around with the DAW to change that, so everything's just based around this basic recording. So having got the bass, we then went on to the first guitar part, and that's the bit which, if I hit play here, we should hear in the left hand side of your
My friend drove his car into a farmer's field.
left hand speaker or headphones. just that simple alternating kind of line there. And I built that up, again, without really knowing what chords I was playing with or anything, just following those bass guitar riffs. But that then became the carrier for the song. We talked about signal and carrier previously. The signal in this is clearly just the lyrics, they're telling the story, but that guitar line then became the carrier for the song. That set the production standard for the song. So I don't know what genre this is. It's not a rock song. It's not really a kind of singer-songwriter so much, because it's mostly electric guitar based. But it is what it is. It's probably kind of chamber pop or something like that if you stick it into Spotify. So what did we do then? Then we looked at the organ was the next part I played. So that was, there's a bit where the organ comes in, so around about here. So this will come in, I think, on the right-hand side. They say the devil's in the details. Yeah. So again, that was played on the guitar because I'm not a keyboard player, and then there's a little virtual instrument to turn that into the organ sound. Then there was the second guitar part, so the second electric guitar with these little arpeggios. Just sat there crying behind the wheel. So on the third time through, it has that slight change in the arpeggio. It's a falling arpeggio, so you set a pattern. Remember, we talked about kind of creating a pattern and then inverting it in some way. So it descends, rises, and then descends again. So again, just little things just to make it slightly more interesting for what's a very basic part. Then we looked at the strings, so the cello. Right, if I just zoom in on the cello a bit here. So I'm not a composer, I'm not a writer of music, so when it comes to things like strings, I have to kind of approach things a little bit more mechanically. And the way I would normally do this is by just kind of hammering in the triads for the chords, then kind of moving them the notes within those chords around a little bit, stretching the kind of the breadth of those chords, and then moving it so it looks a little bit less like this and a little bit more like this. So we've got some nice kind of actual melody lines and some voice leading in there. But having written this, building on riffs, so the bass riff, the guitar riff, the organ riff, and then the little arpeggio on the electric guitar, I didn't actually know what the chords for this song were off the top of my head, and I didn't even really know what key I was in. So I grabbed my trusty guitar and hit play, and just in the details. But I've always been a details kind of guy. And I was very disappointed to discover that basically I'd written something which could just be a 1-4-1-5 chord progression. And then it occurred to me that actually it didn't have to be that, although that did work, because I hadn't built things around the chords. As long as I stayed within the key, I could play around a lot more. So I like to keep my choruses fairly simple, so I started that with a 1-4-1-5, but then I made it a 1-4-6 minor 5. Again, very straightforward. But then getting into the verse, I could play around by putting 2 minors and 3 minors and things like that in. So instead of just I could have and do things a little bit more interestingly. So I did that for the verse, and then did my usual thing of spreading out those chords and coming up with some slightly more interesting voice leading for the cello part. Then I had to face up to the fact that I really had no idea what I was doing with the middle 8. So I'd initially started out with the bass running all the way through, but I wasn't happy with that, so I dropped the bass out. You can see that cuts off there and doesn't go through that middle 8 section, and I needed something a bit different. So I was quite happy with the way the organ and the electric guitar part worked, but something else was needed. So I grabbed that floor tom just there and bashed in a couple of extra percussion parts, which shifted up the flavour a bit. Then I thought it does need something on the bottom end, and that's when I grabbed the chord progression that I've been playing around with earlier and pulled together a little double bass mini part where we've just got this alternating high-low section. So if you have a listen there, got that low, high, low, high. And that was enough to just tie that together in a vaguely interesting way, I thought. I did think about re-recording that part on the double bass, but by this point I got it programmed in, and who's to know? Fairly straightforward. This is the main vocal part, 3 or 4 takes, and then comped the best one there. But what I will talk about here is that in this middle 8 bit, this radio vox bit where we suddenly have the very different vocals, that is from the original rough take of the vocal, because I did kind of try it 2 or 3 times, I think, on when I was re-recording the main vocals, but I wasn't quite as happy with it, so it didn't have the right vibe. Remember, our kind of hierarchy of importance when it comes to sort of writing and performance is right up there. Recording is not so high. This is a classic case, so I've just used that original rough recording because that had the vibe I want, and performance beats perfection every time. Also means, take some care when you're doing your initial recording, because you never know what might actually make it right the way through to the end. I then had a listen through the whole thing and dropped in various markers for moments where it needed some ear candy, so little things to make it a bit more interesting. And we can see some of those as we look at the automation lanes on some of these instrument parts. So if we have a look at the this second guitar part here, has a couple of throws to the there's a multiple verb, so it's actually a delay, not a verb. So when it gets this kind of ka 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 sound. So if we have a listen here,
but we all fall a little harder in the mornings.
So just something to give it a little bit more interesting. There's a couple more of them pop up occasionally. What have we got down here in the organ? We've got a little bit here where just as the organ fades out, I then send a little bit to this, what I call the throw verb, which is this massive reverb there. So if you have a quick listen there.
If you didn't have bad luck.
Again, just a little something to make it a little bit more interesting. Similarly, you'll see other little things all over the shop here. So when the cello fades out here, there's a similar kind of thing.
This is my broken head.
Which just ties together that kind of chorus into the weird quarter bit there. If we scroll down a little bit, we'll see these pad tracks, so these 3 here, and these again have various different synth effects on there. So I've then got sends coming from some of the other instruments, and they just again add little bits of interest. So where's an example here? If we have a listen here,
and when they asked him, he didn't know why.
Plunky bit there, again just a little send in there. Similarly, if we listen to the middle 8 here, what's going on here, little tinkly bit over on the left hand side. So various bits of ear candy, and then likewise we've then got a transitions line here. So these are just bits, generally kind of whooshes or rises or something, that take it clearly from one section to the next. So if we just have a listen to this one here, that whoosh, so it's just setting it up to move into the next section. And while I talk about moving from one section to another, you recall way back we were talking about contrasts, and you can't go big if you haven't gone small, and you can't go wide if you haven't gone narrow. So here's just a really simple example here. This bass line here originally played all the way through there. Instead, I've just dropped out a note there. So there's just a little bit of quiet, just a note's worth of quiet before it kicks into the chorus. And if we have a listen,
It's a busy night.
you get that there's a brief moment,
It's a bit.
just that brief silence before it jumps into the chorus, and that just helps there be a step up when we move into the next section. So after putting all that stuff in, it was then far too busy. Time for the axe. So this is where we can see, now normally I would have tidied this up a little bit as I went along, but I left all these in to show you as the worked example. So let's have a look. What have we got going on here? So guitar bus, dropping the guitar out entirely in the third chorus. So that's both electric guitars going through there. Drums, so I've chosen to drop the drums out in the first half of the first verse and then bring the kick in, but not bring the rest of the drums in until that first chorus. In the middle 8, I drop the main kit and just leave the side drums running and then fade it back in. So nothing from the main kit.
And the newspaper said that nothing at all.
Gradually hear it coming back in. Some of the groove percussion, got a log drum in the corner that I was bashing there as well, that high frequency, tap, 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 tap. Okay, so similarly the bass, what have we got? We've already talked about dropping little notes out. That dropped out entirely in the middle 8 and the weird quarter, and then was replaced with the double bass part. Guitars, I said that this first guitar was the carrier for the song. You know, it really defines the feel and the production and everything I was going to do with the song, but it doesn't mean it has to play all the way through. So at the start of this, the bridge after the first chorus, it's gone, and then I gradually fade it back in, just starting to hear it coming back in. And now we're setting the tone for the verse again. Did something similar around quarter 3, and then of course it doesn't exist at all in the weird quarter, it's gone. Second guitar part was much less interesting, so much less of it survived. Chopped out whole chunks of it, just gone, so it's only playing in half of the first verse, into the second chorus, second half of the verse, and then there's a little bit playing some basic chords. What else have we got then? The organ, similarly, so there's a combination of the mute and the volume things here. So initially I had it playing all the way through, cut that out of the first verse, doesn't need it, bring it in the chorus, gives things a bit of a lift, and then again chopping it out in various places, a few little kind of edits around here to make that kind of drop out work better on the ear, so it's not just a sudden stop. So
If you didn't have bad luck, you'd have no luck.
So again, that's supported by this big send to that huge verb. Piano only plays in a little bit at the end there, so there wasn't much to cut. There was always going to be one bit I forgot about, so just adding that in now. When we talked about ear candy right back at the beginning of the production blog, I talked about the balance between kind of ear candy and honesty. And some songs require a much more stripped back approach, some are much more busy. So the first half of the song, well, the first bulk of it, there's quite a lot of those ear candy moments with the transitions and the kind of sends to different verbs and the various little synth bits coming in and out. Then when we move to the middle 8, not the middle 8, sorry, when we move to the weird quarter, suddenly the feeling changes and it goes from being this kind of quite busy popish production to being much more stripped down with just the acoustic guitar, the double bass and the strings. And at that point, all the ear candy stops as well, until just towards the end of that section, if you have a listen to that piano vamping going on, you'll just hear that actually a reverb send starts going off in there, and that's the only ear candy I put in there, just kind of using the additional elements a little bit, just a little bit of spice to move in to the next section. Cello, this is an interesting one. Okay, so I'd written all these string parts by playing around with the chord structure that I hadn't invented at that point, and then what do? I just mute it, whole first verse and chorus, second verse I was really quite liked these parts. I thought they were quite interesting. Some nice melody lines in there, but it wasn't necessary for the song. So you've got to be ruthless. Cut, 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 cut. If it's not supporting the song, cut it out. Similarly, when we look at these backing vocals, you know, I've recorded some extra lines here on the Bevox 1 and 2 for that third chorus, but cut it out. In fact, so much of that third chorus was initially like the kind of the loudest bit of the song, the climax, but in the end, it ended up being nothing of the sort. It drops right back to just drums and vocal, and then starts to build up again with the bass coming back in, and then the other elements returning. That's pretty much it. And again, third with the other backing vox as well. You know, these are repeater lines for the main lyrics, but again, I decided not all of them need to be there. So we've got the high harmony there, and then this worked better.
Very much is mine.
More intensity there. While I'm thinking of backing vocals and middle eights and stuff like that, I'm just going to jump back to a little tweak we talked about with the lyrics. So if I zoom in here, we'll see that this is the original part of the recording. This green bit here is actually from the new take. This bit in green here is actually from the new take. And that's because the original lyrics had the line, "It wasn't enough, it was never enough." And for me, that felt we were moving on too quickly from this horrific situation. By just repeating that line, "It wasn't enough, it wasn't enough," it forces you back into that scenario. It doesn't let the kind of brain swiftly move on. So it really highlights the kind of the situation there. While I've got the lyrics back up, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about some of the little tweaks that I made as we went through. So there's a few corrections that I've highlighted in here. One of them doesn't leave very much behind. I changed that, doesn't leave very much as mine, because this first verse is all about kind of me, really, and I wanted to highlight that. Then we've got the kind of "we all die a little harder in the mornings" was the first line. I swapped that out to "we all fall." The internal rhyming structure is a bit better, and also we're tackling the death full on in a couple of verses time, so I didn't want to kind of subtract to that or kind of warm people up to it. What else have we got? Yeah, I've swapped a couple of these lines around, both in this line and the next. So in this one, initially I had it as "the police were called, tried to get him to talk, but the newspaper said they did nothing at all." Kind of cause then effect. It works better on a tension and release basis by having "the newspaper said they did nothing at all," outcome, but the police were called, tried to get him to talk. So there's that tension and then the release. Similarly, in the next line, originally it's the last thing I have left, so I text it to myself. Reversing that, so it gives you the action and then the reason, again sets up that tension and release. Okay, so at this point, I'd been through lots of stuff, chopped lots of bits out, but the weird quarter was bugging me. Specifically, it's got that acoustic guitar part on that side. Was not happy with what I was getting there. I tried different mics, I tried different guitars, I tried different picks, and actually the problem was more fundamental. It was in the composition. So when I first wrote this part, just on the acoustic guitar, it was all in open voicings of the chords. So those high strings ringing out, nice and full sounding, works very well when it's just you playing. But when I'd recorded it and built it all up, it was just making a mess. It was really interfering with the cymbals and just causing this kind of high frequency mush. And I tried different mics, different picks, all this other stuff. What it really needed was a simple revoicing of the chords. So instead of these kind of open voicings like that, it actually just needed to be played with a simple bar chord. It doesn't sound nearly as nice in isolation, but it worked for the song, and that's the critical thing. You know, we talked about this in the troubleshooting blog. You know, don't be afraid to go back and rework a part. Sometimes it just needs a simple revoicing. Sometimes it will need something more complex melodically, but nothing is sacred. You can pull things apart, rewrite them as necessary. Okie doke. What else have we got? So, more chopping. You'll see that there's a big lump of space at the beginning of the project. That's because originally the intro was twice as long, and it wasn't doing anything interesting, so it got cut by half. Them's the rules. I think that was all the composition side of things, and so then it was just a case of doing the finishing side of things. So I reached for my standard set of kind of finishing tools, which all do various little jobs. And if I scroll down to the render of the final track and drag that out, gosh, that looks horrific like that. But if I bring the scaling down to something more reasonable, we can see that I've still got some healthy dynamics in there. Nothing's clipping. There's plenty of kind of contrast dynamically. You know, there's some quite loud sections in here, and then, as I say, that kind of third chorus ended up being a really stripped back chorus, and the overall loudness I think ended up as like minus 13.9, so it will be kind of it's right in the ballpark of where I wanted it. It sits in the right space for most of the stuff that it's going to end up being played next to or against if I release it. I haven't decided yet. This was a proof of concept, a worked example. I'm quite happy with it as a song, but I probably need to sit on it for a couple of months and see how it stands up. So that's it from me. Thank you for joining me on this journey from scrapbook to SoundCloud, or rough to release, dare I say. Hopefully some or even most of this has been useful to some people. I hope you've got something out of it, and thanks for joining me.